Sister Keisha, who is Dr. Ron Daniels?
Dr. Ron Daniels is Pan-Africanist who comes from First World Alliance, going back to the 80s, early 90s. He also took part in various documentaries as far as slavery is concerned and Black history is concerned. He was also a part of that whole 80s, early 90s Pan-Africanist fight here in the state of New York, because during that time we had a litany of racial injustices that were taking place in the city and in the state. So he was a part of that movement. However, he has always been a person who played the background and always looked for a leg up on what was happening. He has always been a person who has promoted his organization, which you all have mentioned already, taking trips back to the continent. All of this is, economically feasible for Ron Daniels and his association to be a part of this bill. He, along with other organizations who I find problematic as far as reparations is concerned, like December 12th movement, are also looking for their hand in the pie. We had a
And
meeting.
we gonna get to that too.
We had a meeting actually during the screening of the film about Fred Hampton, Judas and the Black Messiah. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a screening done here in Brooklyn, and we were asked to be a part of a panel discussion about reparations. I was on the panel, Pan Africa was on the panel, a couple of other people, and two persons from December 12th movement. And immediately out the gate, they started talking about education programs and housing programs and all of this old kind of stuff. So I let them shoot their spiel. But when it was my turn to speak, I just let them know that this was unacceptable. Now, again, this was the
Mm-hmm.
screening of Judas and the Black Messiah. I don't know what year that was. But so they got a little bit upset because I was shooting down their arguments. It got to the point where I had to let them know that this conversation was over and they had no standing to advocate for anybody. So that was that. But yeah, that was that with the Senate talk. But
Mm.
Ron Daniels, is a part of. This is what he's always been doing. Always looking out for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
He's always been a part of this movement, especially here in New York, pushing for reparations, but reparations that aren't lineage based,
Right.
reparations that aren't involving any kind of monetary justices for the descendants, but always program based.
Yep.
Right. Right. Cause so that leads me perfect segue, and I feel like you set me up for that. You know what I mean? So my next question is, um, so the first draft of this bill, you mentioned, I've heard you mention before that there were some things in the bill, it seemed like, people had their grubby little fingers trying to, get some of the money off the top, not even, scooping it, like sneaking it out, or no, they was trying to put it in the bill. Now, I heard you mention that. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah. So, and it kind of, I just want to finish my other thought from the last question before we segue to who Ron
Hmm.
Daniel is. So they held a Twitter space. Assemblymember Salages, Assemblymember Taylor Darling, who's no longer there, and Jam IUR, who is with the NBCI Trust. She was just on Van Lathan's um, not to plug anybody else's podcast. She was just on another podcast speaking about how reparations should be for the entire diaspora. So this is still something that they're pushing even now, even with this Foundational Black American Renaissance. So we have to be aware of that. And so even then, back then, that was who they were and still doing that. And so they held a Twitter space where they talked about why the bill was a good. Now this is after our conversation, right? And saying we had to see the table. They still pushed this bill that they knew was unconstitutional and that had said, "Oh, there we go. You got it." Segue to your question. Not only was it an unconstitutional bill, not only was it a race-based bill, not only was it reparations filtered through a Pan-Africanist lens, their ideology and what I call their religion, they had 3 Pan-African organizations baked into the crust. And so,
what you mean by that? What? Explain exactly what you mean by that.
So the first iteration of this reparations bill, which was authored by Charles Barron, shout out to Charles Barron. I don't agree with everything he's done, but he has done some good work to get shouted out for his community, for his people, for our people. And so that first iteration had NARC / Cobra written into the bill, IBW 21 written into the bill, and the December 12th movement written into the bill.
Who? December? Who?
The
Say
December
that again.
12th.
Hold up! Hold up! Sister Keisha, what organization did you say Dr. Ron Daniels was a part of?
Come through, give receipts. I didn't even know. Go ahead.
Did you what you said? What you said over there, Sister Keisha? Okay, so he's a part of the December 12th. I distinctly remember you saying that just a few moments before Devine let us know. So now isn't it I know like I'm not like the brightest bulb in the shed. But don't you think it might be like a conflict of interest?
Come on.
To like have a person who would benefit from the bill on the commission to make recommendations for the money? You know, like I said, I'm not a genius. I'm not a political strategist, but I was just wondering if anybody thought that sounds funny. Anyone?
Not only did we think it sounded funny, we knew it was funny. And so we had no idea how to stop it at this time. You know, again, we just everyday Black Americans walking off the street, figuring out that something needs to be wrong. But we're like, this has to violate some law, some ethics, something. We know that politics is corrupt, right? But it's like something has to be able to be done because this is egregious, right? And this is blatant.
But that was before the commission was even together.
Yes, right. This is the bill as it's moving through the legislature. It has these
so you're telling me I'm pardon. I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead.
So you're telling me that the politicians that signed off on a bill that was unconstitutional, that they were fully knowledgeable was unconstitutional. Not only was it unconstitutional, it had corruption baked in the bill. And then they figured it out, at least the corruption part, because this is not the current bill that we've been fighting. Correct?
Right.
But they removed those entities from the bill, from the crust of the bill, as you were talking about earlier. So
yes and no. I'll say yes and no.
Okay. They took the organizations out, correct?
Yes and no. I'm gonna let you cook, but I wanna make this distinction because it's important.
All right. Well, But then, so they recognized that that was not a good idea. But then they put the person from the organization that they removed from the bill onto the commission. Make that make sense?
The gatekeeper.
So here's the distinction I want to make, because you said you were in, I know you a lovely young, you know, flower, right? In this whole process.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
but you're giving them way too much credit. You said they figured it out. You said they removed them. That's not what happened. They figured
Oh,
out they figured out that we figured it out.
ah, I
And
like
then they
that.
were they were forced to remove it
Okay,
because
okay.
our first major movement as an organization was to start a public facing call to action. And this is where I first met a lot of the people that I still know and work with today that were on Twitter that we hadn't got a chance to meet personally or in person. And we took it to the family, used Twitter Space again, that just came out. So this is like in its early days. And we said, hey,
Mm-hmm.
family in New York, outside of New York, look what they're trying to do. They have three organizations that, if this bill passes, the Pan Africans will have carte blanche over not only what the commission says and does, but any of the recommendations, meaning they get to control what reparations
Right.
is, who reparations
Mm-hmm.
potentially go to, and what
Mm-hmm.
it looks like. Because the
Mm.
original bill called for a 11-person task force.
Mm-hmm.
And in the bill, it stated that each organization, again, NARC slash and Cobra, I know there's two separate organizations, but I call them the same thing.
Right.
The IBW 21, which again is kind of the same thing, but that's another organization.
Right.
And then the December 12th movement. Each of those organizations would get 2 picks apiece.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking about experts. We're not talking about scholars. We're not. Well, some of them are scholars. I'm not going to take too much away from them. But we're not talking about experts in the repertory justice field. We're talking about any
Right.
people from their organization that they want to appoint. And so you have 3. Each gets 2. Easy math. 3 times 2 is 6. It's an 11-person commission. So 6 automatically gives them the majority, which is the quorum, to make whatever decision they make. So the other 5, whoever they was going to be, are irrelevant, because all 6 of these are on one accord, because all 3 of those organizations are connected, if not the same organization, under different names. And
So
so
how did you fight this? How did you overcome this?
the family, and this was my first introduction to, when people say power to the people, this was my introduction in real time, not reading it in a book, but real time. We got online, we made the petition, because it was just us, right? Again, we're the only organization fighting for this. Not only are the Pan Africans united on this, because we're not going to leave them out, but they're not alone. All of our
Mm-hmm.
legacy organizations are right in step with them. So we talk about the
Lockstep.
NW lockstep. We talk about the NAACP.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about Al Sharpton and the National Action Network. We talk about the Urban League,
Mm,
right? All these
mm.
organizations are right in line with the Pan Africans for different reasons, maybe, but still still the same. They are in lockstep fighting for race-based policies and this
So
order of kickbacks and stuff like that. They're all complicit.